morning, Grenada. Good morning to Sister Isles, Carriacou, Petit Martinique. How's everybody doing? Welcome to another edition of To The Point. It's Monday, already the 13th day of the month. February seems to be a fast-moving month for some reason. I don't know if it's me that is thinking that way, but it's like February started a week ago. Let me say good morning to Mr. McIntyre with us this morning. How you doing, sir?
Good morning to you.
Nice to have you back. I think it's our first show. We are
for the year.
For the year. But actually, it's imperative that I say Happy New Year to you.
Yes, you should say Happy New Year because I haven't interacted with you in person since
last year.
Last year was the last time.
Sometime in December when we did the final show. Sometime in December.
Yes, we did.
And I mean, you had there were previous shows that was done, but I was doing a different shift at the time, so right. I wasn't able to accommodate you. But I've been back.
So it's good to be back and good to be with you.
Last week we couldn't have the show last week. We had the Independence celebration just last week. I'd like to commend you on the commentary, yourself and the officer. Were able to find out a lot of stuff that was going on, in terms of how the parade and stuff was going on. I want to commend you on that. You always been doing a good job of that every year. I always know that besides you and who you've been commentating with, always give the pertinent information.
Yes. And I wanted to roll back to the independence celebration, and look, you just hit it. We really want to congratulate Grenada for 49 years of achievement, and the parade and everything else. And one of the highlights that we did not speak about too much was the drone caption, and that was again provided through a drone team that was provided by the RGPF.
All right.
They have a drone team, and the drone that they have is state-of-the-art, capable of also helping with crime solving.
Great.
Like if it have infrared capability, and if people go missing or otherwise, it can help them.
Lovely.
Traffic congestions and traffic situation. The team of drone operators or pilots that now the RGPF have is really commendable. And I want to commend personally Commissioner of Police because he went beyond the regular call of duty to make sure that happened. And the Independence celebration this year was really fully covered by the drone team of the RGPF. So kudos to them.
Yes, kudos. I mean, sometimes you're not know that there are particular divisions within the force that do these things. And you understand you didn't know about that. And happy to know that, man. Well, we're back with another program. As usual, as we did last year, coming into this year, there's been lots of other programs previous to this one within the month of January and so forth. But this morning we want to get into continue to speak to our people about preparedness.
Yes,
that's the key word in everything that we talk about
so
here
far
in terms of disaster and so forth. Prepared. And the individual have to be prepared. You never know. You understand? We want to focus a lot this morning on. Before you start, anything else you want to throw? Because, we always have to get that little chit-chat in before we...
it's really, really good to soften the atmosphere. I think with the little voice on, that will create our listening audience too once they hear us on. But it's also good to chime in on what's happening around us.
Yes.
We have quite a number of activities in Grenada and the region. So I came from Carriacou and Petit Martinique, and they had their celebrations going on for independence.
Yes. And
they also spilled right into the carnival. Albeit I understand that last evening they had the junior Soca Mona competition.
I ask for forgiveness. This year somehow I've been a little bit off in terms of getting information from Carriacou. I know the reasons why for it. I used to have tons of information what's happening in Carriacou. I don't know if it's my fault this year or this time around, but I'm kind of low-key on information from Carriacou, and my bad. So if you have to share, I would love to hear what's going on.
Yes, that was going on really good, and one person called me and said that it is one of the most looked forward to event. The youth Monarch people. They said it is really, really well attended and so forth, and they can see a future where that is concerned.
Well, happy to know, because when youngsters are participating in events, there's a future for whatever that is to come.
Yes.
You understand? And if they're maintaining a particular standard also, it makes you feel proud to know that, we could be at a particular age where we home sit down and just listening, and we know that there's something good coming from the future of the youngsters out there.
So those of us who are aging and aging sometimes graciously or otherwise, we want to be given the assurance that whether it is a security issue, an emergency issue, or whether it is cultural or otherwise, that our future is secured and it is in capable hands. And so me, that once I hear of an event, whether it is in Carriacou and or Petit Martinique or Grenada, if it's even the region, my emergency air clicks in.
Yes.
And the last program we had, we spoke about events, major events and security arrangement, what should be happening. I can tell you from the buzz around, I had one or two calls inquiring as to how, people can get registered and what kind of equipment and items that people need to have, and whether there is a formal registration process and whether there is a standard for all of this. So the conversation started. I think, GT, this is what we being seeking to do, is to create the conversation, identify the issues, and see movement in that direction.
Continue keeping that buzz, as you would say.
Yes.
Keeping the thought in mind that folks, you need to prepare yourself, and there are areas that which you could participate in, voluntary areas that you could participate, to make sure that not only yourself but your friends, your other family members, your neighbor, could also, by sharing information, they could also be prepared for whatever takes to happen.
Right. And as I monitored some of the major events, including sporting events, you know that, well, the sporting term is here for most of all of our schools. And so I look closely to see what kind of a medical emergency first response that they are. I am still picking up some weaknesses within some of the systems. As I did say before, once someone is creating an event, you are entrusting the lives of others into your care, and people are putting them into your care as well, and therefore the arrangement for health, safety, security, those matters, they cannot be understated. There has to be some parameters for that. And I also reached out and challenged the national system, that is those at the policy making level, to ensure that there are conditions, there are criteria, there are standards that people should meet, and those requirements should be enforced. One of the weaknesses that we have here in legislation and instruments is the enforcement process, and I spoke about that a little bit on the last program I was on.
And sometimes you look at it in all areas too.
Yes.
That enforcement part of things it's just lacking for some reason here. There are so many laws. I mean, on Thursdays I will entertain members of the Royal Grenadier Post, and they speak a lot about the laws that governs a lot of the things that are going on. But then when it comes around and you see what's happening, the enforcement part, that's where the weakness lies.
Yes.
The weakness lies right there.
And what I would hope to see as an expansion of law enforcement is that every citizen make it his or her responsibility to enforce the law, meaning that if you see somebody breaking the law, you can draw it to their attention. And there's also, which is sometimes a gray area, the civilian force or pause of arrest, where you can actually bring somebody into custody as a civilian for committing certain levels of crime. But the point is, people don't always have to go to that extreme where they physically, apprehend somebody, except in an extreme case. You can report people. Our society is really small and everybody knows just about everybody. But what we're saying here is that if you see somebody doing something, by all means, draw it to their attention or bring to the attention of law enforcement so that it could be corrected. And if you observe that there is a weakness somewhere in emergency response, because that is what we're trying to build. That is one of my forte, and that is my passion, to see Grenada becoming safer and to see that we have instruments in disaster risk reduction and emergency response.
Because there's always sometimes an issue where even the folks who are in charge of in a particular emergency or happens, and sometimes they may have a little missight in certain things, and you being an individual who are looking on, you may say, if they have done that or have done this, it could have made life a bit easier. It's not that they don't know, but sometimes in the process of conducting their duty, it's kind of a bit they miss it.
Yeah.
And if you can see and you can talk to someone and say, if maybe you all did this or did this, maybe the terminology you may use may not input, but they may understand where you're coming from, and that could help improve in terms of what they were doing. Right.
And you play right into the lap of some of the things that we are going to be talking about later on today. It's about empowering people. It's about providing the knowledge that people have an understanding as to what's happening, and give it what it is. I have my own way of conducting my assessment, ground tutoring, finding out what's happening outside there, whether we are improving, and I can see movement in smaller areas because the buzz is beginning to happen, and people are becoming more conscious. People who know what quality of service they expect, they are standing up for that. And people who were not too sure as to what they should do, they now have more knowledge as to how they can go about doing something, and we want to expand on that. But as the conversation continue, we want to be very current. With festive seasons, with sports, with activities, we are going to have more emergencies, you're going to have more injuries, etc. People are going to be more exposed. As we move into the era of climate change, climate variability, and so we are going to have different things happening that it requires a different kind of an intervention. And we're not just speaking about what's happening in Grenada, but we're speaking about what's happening globally.
Around the world.
Because around the world, climate change is having its negative impact. We are seeing natural phenomena, they are impacting more ferociously. They are happening more frequently, and they're causing severe devastation. And as we speak, we are going to be thinking about how can we learn from the experience of others. What's happening in Asia, what's happening in North and South America to an extent, and how can we take a page from that. And as we speak of that, we want to speak of some of the natural phenomena that are impacting. We had a volcano recently, the Hawaiian volcano.
Yes.
And that created a stir. We now have an earthquake that devastated quite a considerable portion of Syria
and Turkey.
And Turkey. We are going to be speaking about that. And so over the last couple of weeks as well, and note well, I'm not saying that we're having more than it used to be, but we've been having some tremors.
Within the Caribbean?
Within the Caribbean area. And the Seismic Research Center at St. Augustine, Trinidad, they have been registering those activities, and they have been giving those of us, the technical people, the feel as to what's going on in the Caribbean.
Okay.
And as you know, the Caribbean is very active where volcanoes are concerned. And what we call that in technical term, they're very seismically active.
Okay.
And so, because Grenada is also very seismically active with Kikem Jenny, Mount St. Catherine, Kikem Jack, etc., the number of boiling springs we have around, we can have things like earthquakes, we can have tremors, and so forth. And how we prepare for that, how our housing sector is built, our engineering design, we're going to talk a little about that this morning, and how what we see happening, how we, if that is to happen to us, because we're not immune.
How are we able to handle it?
To handle it.
How prepared we are as people.
And we're going to zero in a little bit on that.
Let's take our first break, and we come back and we talk a little more in details about that. It's To The Point for today, Monday, here on Classic and also on GBN TV. We're coming right back. Stay with us, folks.
I want you folks to play these 3 games from the NLA. Daily pick 3 cash flow and play with. You will be supporting sports and culture, nation building and our future. So go out and play, folks, make it a must. You will see what the National Lottery is doing for us. When you play pick 3 cash flow and play with, the NLA will support you all the way.
Starting September 30th, Monday to Friday, these 3 games will be drawn mid-morning, 9:45 a.m., midday, 12:45 p.m., and evenings, 7:45 p.m. The National Lotteries, supporting sports, culture, and nation building.
Sandy Manity.
Last week on All Climate Reality.
What we're encountering is something we're calling an enhanced greenhouse effect. This is a phenomenon where the gases that create the greenhouse of the atmosphere are increasing in concentration.
The amount of concrete that we have in our society now compared to 30 years ago is a major issue, because when the sun hits that, it's not getting into the soil where we have carbon sequestration happening. So that bounces back and goes back into the atmosphere and increase the carbon dioxide stock. But a lot of people want to live on the slope, so we deforesting the slopes, and trees is one of the biggest inhibitors of carbon dioxide. They take in so much of it. So every tree we cut means that there is going to be an increase in us producing greenhouse gas and increasing our greenhouse gas.
Join us this Wednesday at 8 p.m. on Our Climate Reality as the discussion delves into the impacts of climate change. GBN Television, Channel 7 and 11, K105, and all our social media platforms.
Welcome back, listeners and viewers, To The Point for today, Monday, the 13th day of February. I'm Mr. Sylvan and McIntyre me this morning, and we're talking preparedness as always. Despite whatever the situation may be, how prepared you are can make a whole lot of difference. So let's get deep into the conversation this morning. We want to focus a lot on the earthquake preparedness.
Yes.
There's a question that's been bubbling in my mind. I don't know if you're able to answer it as I'm thinking about it.
Mm-hmm.
Could you prepare for an earthquake?
Or could you predict an earthquake?
Predict. Well, no, you said...
You can't predict. Well, I can answer you. I can answer you. Yes, you can prepare for earthquake.
Because I'm saying earthquakes do come around, just happens, right?
Yes.
You could be walking the street, someone could be sitting in the comfort of their home, driving their car, and an earthquake could just happen.
Yes.
You understand? Except
Yes.
the experts may get some early warnings if they do have these equipment set up.
Right.
But a regular individual, not until it has a great impact, then you would know an earthquake is actually happening. Because sometimes someone will say, you don't feel that, you said no. You understand? So that's where my question coming to ask, could you prepare for it? Is there any way of preparing to say that I'm prepared if an earthquake comes?
Yes, and I can answer you very short and tell you yes, but I want yes, and it's a very good question because people will ask about it and people will want to know about it. Mm-hmm. In the context of understanding if we could prepare or not be prepared, or whether we can predict or not be able to predict, it is good to understand the origin of earthquakes, where they emanate and what really caused them. So let us start first up that earthquakes are, at the moment, they're not able to be predicted. You cannot predict them. You don't know where they're coming from, but you know that they exist and they will happen. The scientists of recent times have been creating instruments that give you very close to prediction, meaning that once it starts, they are able to possibly look at its origin and give you an indication that it is happening.
And give you send out that early warning.
And they would send out an early warning. So earthquakes occur because of a number of reasons, and your geography and so forth would tell you that you have the Earth's crust is built on different layers. And so you have different islands and different structures generated by different formations. You have folding and you have faulting, and those are activities within the Earth's crust. And they do affect the layers upon which the Earth is being built. In the Caribbean, we have what you call the tectonic plates. And the Caribbean sits on that, and they move, and they are what you call subduction plates. So they would move, and one would go above or under the other once they come across, and they would meet and they would clash from time to time. The impact of those plates would create some tremor, and these are earthquakes.
Okay.
And that's one means of earthquake occurring.
Okay.
The other could be generated by volcanic activity. So, for instance, you have Kikemjeni might be acting up, and tremors would be recorded. They could be low or they could be heavy. And people would wonder, is there a difference between a tremor and an earthquake? And we would go into a little bit of difference in that later on. But volcanoes happen because there's all of this pressure that is created within the belly of the earth. And you have all of this steam and heat that is beyond 200 degrees Fahrenheit and so on, extremely hot, that has the capacity to even melt rock. So these molten rocks and so on become lava and all of that.
And then they move.
And they move, and they're within.
Okay.
Now, when that pressure is built so forcefully within, and it can get its place to come to the surface, it begins to boil up, and it generates some vibration. That vibration, the smaller ones, you call them tremors, and when they become heavier, you call them earthquakes, and so forth. And when you have earthquakes that occur, you have smaller earthquakes that you refer to as the aftershock, or you have the tremors associated, and you'd call them the aftershock. So these will continue, and the aftershocks that are continued or continuing, it simply means that if there were movements, that these plates or the movement, it is beginning to possibly settle back itself. Because when you have such rapid movement, you may have displacement of a huge portion of the Earth's basic level. For instance, under the sea or deep in the belly, you may have some landslides, some slides taking place there. It creates depressions. And within there, you would have these movements continuing for a while, for the Earth in itself trying to get back to its normal position. And this is why when you have huge earthquakes, you would have continuing smaller tremors associated with them, because that movement is still continuing for some time. And when you have sometimes these heavy volcanic eruption taking place, they could generate, one, you see what we're talking about here? tremors can be associated. The other thing that could be associated would be tsunamis.
All right.
And the tsunamis could be generated because you have this huge displacement of the what you call bathymetry, the under level of the sea.
Yes.
So you have topography on the land and you have bathymetry at the bottom of the sea base. So when you have this portion dropping,
that's where the water pulls.
That's it pulls or push, and it generates that force that creates tsunamis, and so it creates another hazard for people to deal with. So when you have all of these activities taking place underneath the earth, it affects what's on the surface of the earth. So it affects buildings, it affects infrastructure, roads and bridges and other things of that sort, where you have cracks and you have bricks and you have landslides and all of these occurring. Sometimes you have sinkholes, all of these occurring. And it is possible for humans to feel them. If they are light, you can in some places. If they are much more heavy, you can. That shaking and that vibrating that is occurring under the surface of the earth, they are registered by something called a Richter scale. So this scale has been designed to register the amount of force or the amount of pressure that happens when an earthquake occurs. So you may hear 2.5, 6 point something, 7 point something, 8 point something. And the higher the number is, the stronger the intensity of the earthquake. So that in a layman's, I hope I have been layman.
Yes, you are.
In terms of explaining where earthquakes come from. And it is basically, in very layman's terms, it's the violent shaking of the ground. That's an earthquake.
Okay.
And that violent shaking can have its impact on, as I said, individuals. It can have impact on the society and on the infrastructure. And to answer your question as to whether or not you can be prepared for them, now I've given you an idea.
An idea what earthquake is.
What they are. And you really cannot predict them because they will occur. You can't tell when this land slippage is going to occur. You can't tell when this thing is going to pop. Like in St. Vincent, we were monitoring the volcano for quite a while. And it is one of the times in history that the scientists were able to come almost 100% accurate in terms of being able to predict when it is likely to explode.
Because of that constant attention that was paid on?
Because the instruments, and I am saying again, preparedness for will determine how you create your instruments and your awareness programs. Because the World Bank and so forth provided a considerable amount of financing towards instruments through the Seismic Research Center in St. Augustine. They provided some monitoring as well as the Montserrat Observatory. They had these instruments monitoring the volcano in St. Vincent. So they were able to test as to what levels the lava flow were coming to the surface. And I remember personally speaking to one of the scientists, and he was saying, we cannot tell exactly when it's going to blow, but it's going to be anytime soon. Because we feel the pressure, our reading is intensifying, and it is saying that anytime now that this could blow, but to say it's going to be 12 o'clock or 1 o'clock, we can't tell. So scientists have gotten to the point where they can predict some things are close to happen, but they cannot give you exactly when it will happen. And in the case of earthquake, whether an earthquake will occur or not, they cannot tell you as it stands now that an earthquake will occur in 2020 or 2020, as the case may be.
Or in an hour or 2 hours.
Or in an hour or 2
hours from now.
No. What they can tell you is that if there is an earthquake that happened, they are likely to tell you you are going to have aftershocks, or you're going to have these repeat tremors happening after most likely a major earthquake. And as to whether people can be prepared, preparedness is broad. One, information as to how to deal with an earthquake when it occurs is critical. So you have the disaster agencies and the disaster organizations that will do community information and preparedness. There is a little thing, drills that people can do. You train them how to do it. There's one called drop, cover, and hold. That's one basic thing. And then the other thing they will tell you, and we're going to expand on that, how you can have things in your home. If you're inside the house, what you should do. If you're outside of the house, what you should do. And I'm going to touch that. Hopefully time will permit. And time is really rolling. But I think we're going to have time for that. We're going to entertain a couple of calls as well. But what we're saying here is our greatest challenge happened to be infrastructure. And if you follow carefully what's happening sometime in Asia and sometimes in South America, the housing stock or the engineering of a lot of structures, they are suspect.
Yes. And, just as you talk about that, I was listening to the news this morning, and especially in Turkey, they are now arresting a lot of the designers of buildings, who designed those buildings. These people are now being arrested because of the poor quality of the construction and so forth. These individuals are now being arrested, because I think most of the buildings that were there were not too old.
Yes.
They were not too old, not say they were there a number of years. Some of them just the last 5 years, 10
Yes.
years, these apartment buildings.
Yes.
So these individuals who did the design, they are now being arrested for that. So
Absolutely. I'm happy that you picked that up and you're bringing it to our listeners and not just me.
Because, it could happen here in Grenada. We're not prone to always having earthquakes in Grenada. It do happen. So sometimes it happens and somebody, we may never feel it. You understand? Maybe at low range.
Yes.
But you never know when a major one could happen.
That's
I mean, let's go back a couple of years. Haiti. You understand? They had that one there. Was it a year or two ago? There's something that happened in Trinidad that where we saw all the in particular supermarkets and Haiti did get another one again.
Yeah.
You understand? Sometimes it doesn't come that strong in the hemisphere that we are in. You understand? But we just never know when it can happen.
Yeah, and I'm happy that you went on that angle because preparedness is really expansive, and I think our viewing and listening audiences, they are beginning to realize how much there is in terms of preparedness. And as you asked the question, could we be prepared? We have to put the responsibility where it really should be. So you mentioned the buildings and people being arrested for sometimes they shaft people.
Yeah.
It is also a responsibility of every citizen. If you're going to build a house, if you're going to spend money, if you're going to get an engineer, you're going to go into a contract that builder, you have to ensure that he build to design.
Yes.
Our building code is sufficient based on what it is. Regardless of who would challenge my statement, I've proven it, I know it, I've seen it, scrutinized it myself, and we must give kudos to our local engineers and the designers of our building code for Grenada and the Caribbean and the Cross-Q. It's the Caribbean Quality for Standards and so on in building. And our building code has been built in a way that if our engineers follow them, our builders follow them, we can have a better housing stock. And it goes back to one of the points that we were making earlier. While the building code in itself there are weaknesses obviously and there are ways that you can improve, but I'm saying it is sufficient for us to build properly. But our weakness is enforcement.
That's so true.
And
I agree, because lots of contractors get away by giving shafty work, as we say in a layman's term of speaking, and they get away with it because the folks who are in charge of making sure that the quality of work should be done.
Yeah.
They are not sometimes don't pay attention to that.
Yeah.
Sometimes a couple of weeks.
They're really expanding on it because I want to be able to build for people to understand what we're talking about. So I went to Haiti in 2010. I was one of the responders for the CARICOM team that went there. And what we saw, a lot of the engineering, design, and what went into those buildings was suspect just as well. And it has to do a lot sometimes with people's poverty level and economic status. And sometimes people are forced to accept substandard things because they cannot afford the regime of inspection process. And that is where state mechanism has to ensure it create the mechanism to protect the average and the ordinary citizen. And in a couple of town hall meetings ago, locally in Grenada, I heard one person raise something with the Prime Minister then about ensuring that our physical planning unit is fully staffed. People getting their plan approved, it takes forever, technically. And when the plan is approved, the inspection process to ensure that people are building, not just for the homeowner, but it's for our society, for our economy. Because if our housing stock isn't built to a particular standard, what we can have is an economic setback when we are losing so much of our housing stock.
Exactly.
It takes national resources to help people to rebuild, not kicking sufficiently. And it goes all the way back to the kind of an impact that you see. I've seen 3- and 4-story buildings in Haiti. They came down to one, just a slab. They kicked one on top of the other, and we got there not long after it happened. So there were a lot of bodies and vehicles and people trapped in those buildings. And had they been designed differently, I saw, when you're building these deckings and so to set your walls up, you have to have a certain level of concrete. The grade of the concrete is critical. The size of the rebars, the reinforcement steel, and so forth, that have to be. And I saw people's decking were done with BRC wire.
And that's it. Just the BRC.
BRC wire. Could you imagine that?
We drew for a little break, Mr. McIntyre. Let's take it. Let's take a little break and we come back. And, you know, time is just not on our side. Hey, folks, your viewers and listeners out there, don't forget your phone calls are also welcome. If there's a point or two that you would like to make or a question you would like to ask, you certainly can do so. We're coming right back after the break. Stay with us.
Sunday, February 26th. It's Savior's Day.
The dry weather season is upon us. It is a time when we all experience the perils of limited water supplies, increased fires, and drought. What do we do? Mother Earth is crying. Are we listening? Let us not get caught unprepared. Join the discussion on Mondays Beyond the Headlines as we discuss the effects of the dry season with Dr. Terrence Walters, National Disaster Coordinator, Mr. Jared Tamar, climatologist at the Met Office, Sergeant Thaddeus Hamilton from the Fire Department of the Royal Grenada Police Force, and Ms. Shamila Ragobir will represent Nawasa. Monday at 8 p.m. Welcome back, listeners and viewers. It's to the point. Myself together with Mr. McIntyre this morning, and we talking preparedness. And we've been spending a lot of time in this time talking about earthquake. And the reason why we talk about earthquake, we know this the situation that occurred in Turkey, Syria. We saw, and you know something we didn't touch on, the massive loss of life.
Yes.
In terms of when folks are unprepared. Preparedness level is at a minimal. You know, I understand the earthquake occurred in the night, so folks will nobody's paying attention to the earthquake of that massive nature is going to happen.
Yeah.
And you understand, and I understand that being at night could be one of the main reasons why the loss of life, but it also goes back to the building code, because if you see the massive number of lives that were lost is for folks who were in buildings.
Yes. And we have 20,000+ people. It's like 1/5 maybe of Grenada's population right now, you know, losing their life through that means. And a lot of people who lost their life, it may not be their own fault. They may not have been careless. They've just been forced by reason of circumstance to be in the building where they were. People built it in a particular way, and because it was not built to a particular design or otherwise, they suffer the consequence of the loss of their own life. And that is sad.
So sad.
And one of the reasons why we're having this program, viewers, listeners, followers, is because we do not want unnecessary loss of life in Grenada. One life is one too many to lose. And so this is why we want you to follow us every week. Listen to the program. We have been speaking about one aspect of earthquake preparedness, and we were speaking about from the foundation of buildings all the way up to the point where people have occupied it. So we established that the design has to be of a particular nature, it has to be engineered properly, and it has to be monitored to ensure that the quality is secured. And when it is occupied, then there's a different level of preparedness for individuals who occupy those buildings, or you go about your day-to-day life. Do you also know that you can, as I did say, you can build any structure that you want anywhere? You can build buildings to be earthquake resistant. If you're very earthquake active,
or if you're prone, or you know the particular area you live is prone to earthquakes, then
that's correct.
You're built to that standard.
For instance, Los Angeles, I went to one of the earthquake centers there, and they have earthquakes every day. And the earthquake center itself, the building that they use to monitor and everything, that building is built with buffers and removable areas that is between every segment. Even our national stadium aspect of it has been designed in that way, so that all of the structures, if there is an earthquake, it shakes and it can bounce off the other. So there are levels of flexibility between there. There's something like rubber buffers, so the building can go left, it can go right, it can go up, it can go down.
I would not crumble.
I would not crumble. They allow this level of flexibility. You can build on water. You can build in a swamp. You can build in hills, you can build valleys, you can build on slope. You have to understand the soil type, and you have to understand what engineering design that is best suited for there. We've had, unfortunately, that house and that land slippage in Molineux. Again, there was a house, in my opinion, that was properly built. And if you ask me, I would commend the engineer or the builder who built that house.
Okay, it's not the time.
That's the point I'm about to make.
It's still its time.
The thing is that there were a lot of reasons that you may not have heard that could have been contributing factors to the movement of the soil. Whether or not the testing of the soil, whether or not the type of building that was built was suitable for the soil upon which it was built is another question.
Yes, for sure.
And this is why the structure stayed together. It took quite some time. It buckled, it held. And some of the things that you saw that was missing from it, it was because they removed it.
Okay.
But the building was together. It says that there was some builders and engineering design that went into it that kept it together. So despite the soil was moving, the building was held together. And it's the kind of a thing that we would want to see. The structure, something goes into it, and where people are going to build, whether or not we are doing soil type testing in Grenada before certain structures are being built is one of the questions that can be answered. Whether or not the physical planning...
You know, lots of time folks would not do that in terms of building construction. Because some folks would say it's a cost. So some folks would like to bounce off that cost. Do I need to do soil testing and all of that because it's a cost? But sometimes it can benefit, and the benefit of it in the long run is so important. We had
a couple of years ago, there's a process called liquefaction. Now, liquefaction relates to the fluid content in the liquid content in soil that causes it to be unstable, and it is susceptible or vulnerable to land slippage or pulling away at any time. You may have old ravines, you may have swamps or otherwise that may have dried up. You may have an old water area that may become dry over a period of time, and some process of time, moisture may seep into that area. So underneath, the water exists, but the surface seems
to be dry. That's all that point there. We have a caller been holding for a wee bit. Let's take the
caller.
Caller, good morning, welcome.
Good morning to Sylvan. The thing about Sylvan said something about you cannot predict, and maybe accurately, but there are ways in which people over the years have been able to figure out that something is going to happen. Somebody sent me a video about the birds behaving in a funny way, very strangely, the night before this event in Turkey or Syria. So if we're not in tune with nature, we could be caught off guard. We are told in the tsunami, in the Asian tsunami, that some of the animals left way beyond the human beings. So if we really are in tune with nature, we can minimize the impact on loss of life. Now let me say this. In the 80s, I remember listening or watching a 60-minute production, the 60 Minutes thing. And the issue of using the science, which was becoming more and more available to people, to those who with power also, to be able to protect, to minimize the loss of life and property and so on. And you know what I heard one of the insurance people who was on that program say, I'll never forget that. Well, if you use it, what will happen? The insurance companies would not make money. So if we use all we know, we could minimize. And what Sylvan's saying, there's a lot of truth in it. You can build in certain situations and protect. Japan is doing that. We need to understand that we are not the masters of nature, and nature will finally have its say. Now, if we explain earthquake as something where the Earth system or the planet system is trying to maintain or go back to a state of equilibrium, people will understand. Even we as human beings need to find equilibrium from time to time. And finally, A few years ago, I heard one of the scientists said that we should be preparing for a major tsunami sometime. He said we couldn't predict that, but he said based on pattern, based on history, a tsunami is overdue in the Caribbean, this region. And I've seen no sign that in terms of from all right across the Caribbean or even in the Americas, there's any effort to help our people be prepared. Instead, we're doing everything to undermine our future security. Thank you very much for your indulgence. Bye.
Thank you also, caller. Thank you for your comments there this morning. Thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you, caller. Again, we respect your input with that. I just like to expand on it a little bit. There's a lot of difference in prediction, accurately being able to predict, forecasting, and indicators. While all of them may fall within the same ambit, they do have their own impact or impression. It depends on what and how you're speaking about. While, yes, I totally agree with you that we need to be in tune with nature, the movements of the animals and the turning of the leaves and the moving of the birds and all of those are natural indicators that people can see. But to say from that it's going to happen at 10, 12, or 8 o'clock, there's no real means of predicting that will happen at that time. Right. So there are indicators.
There are something, these natural
precursors.
They are what we call signs. You may get signs of what it's actually predicting the time is going to happen.
Yes.
It may not always be.
There is no instrument that has been designed to accurately capture when that will happen. But I respect the caller's intervention.
Yeah, we do have another caller. Caller, good morning, welcome.
Good morning. How are you?
We're doing pretty okay.
Doing fine.
What I need to say is that concerning Mr. Sylvan's education and preparation information, it is necessary, yes, thank you for it. But when we educating, we must be on a holistic base. Remember, the controller of these disasters, whatever, is God. So we must educate them on the preparation and their soul as well, because whenever these things come, there is no respect to a person's getting caught up. So the preparation also with Christ is of vital importance. Thank you.
Thank you, caller. Thank you for
respected, ma'am. 100%.
Respect that.
Yes.
As we move on this morning, just around 11 minutes left on today's program. We do welcome your calls, but we started off talking about preparedness. We did speak about we did speak about the building codes that folks should respect and how it could be done.
Mm-hmm.
I wanted to indulge ourselves more in about people's personal preparedness.
Okay.
You understand? How can an individual prepare themselves for when that disaster have occurred? Things that we should do.
Yes.
Especially, the earthquake came and it has passed. Or in the process of it happening also, what are some of the things individuals should practice or know they should have been doing or to do just in case?
Preparedness is a continuum. And in this life is exciting. Life is dynamic. When you're not preparing for one, you're preparing for the other. And is it possible to be prepared for everything? But we have to be conscious, and this is one of the reasons why we exist, so we can provide the information that people could learn and do things that could prevent loss of life. And the one we spoke about, the designs of house and so forth. Now, when you are outfitting your house as a level of preparedness, because we are still seismically active in this part of the world, how you build shells, where you locate things in your house, for instance, where you sleep, if likely you're going to have tremor, why are you sleeping in a place where you have huge and heavy stuff above where you are? If you have tremors, they're going to fall, they're going to damage somebody. If you are in a building that has like loose cylinders, for instance, you have the hospitals that may have all of these oxygen tanks, etc. Do you have them loose or do you secure them to the walls? These are some regular preparedness measures.
Or basic practices.
And so on. If you are in a flood-prone area, you know the area is going to flood. It's going to flood maybe when you're out. Always have your things a couple feet off the ground, so even if you're not there, you wouldn't lose.
Or the impact of the damage would be minimal for you.
Would be minimal. Again, if you are going out of your home for some time, there should be some level of preparedness for your means. And that has its implication also for earthquakes. Now, if you turn your main off and an earthquake goes and it shatters and breaks one of them, you can be guaranteed that some of the things that could become flammable, or the fluid, the gas or otherwise, it may not move from one point to the next. Did you have a caller?
Yeah, we do have a caller.
Okay, let's.
Caller, good morning. Welcome.
Morning, sir. How are you?
I'm doing pretty well. Good morning to you.
To Mr. McIntyre. Especially to Mr. McIntyre. I had a look at that Falls airstrip. I'm just giving an idea. I think that place should be cleaned up and make half so, okay, the population could have access. And another half, secure it as a place of emergency. I know that a C-130 aircraft can land on one half, and choppers that carry cargo and so forth. In case of a disaster, that you should take it over. All right?
All right, cool. Thank you so much, Bill. Yes, we are hearing you. We are hearing you loud and clear.
In case of a disaster, you have that place already secure as an emergency. That falls scripted is too much chaos or a bad sight. It's not looking good. And then one of the things I know of, I'm not too sure, but I know one of the places I know that built as a hurricane earthquake resistance is the Monge Hospital. Because the company that was building there, I was working with them, and when I see they're doing it that way, I want to ask them why that is happening, and they said that is for earthquake resistance. Like they're not digging a foundation, but you're putting all the forms on top of the clear area, you put all the forms on top of it, then you put your soil onto it, because what they say, the shifting is like you're resting on a mat. So when the earthquake shaking, that bottom part that will be shaking, but the other part will be holding together. But thank you. That's my contribution.
Thank you, caller. Thank you so much. Thank
and
you
it's
so
well
much.
respected. Thank you for your contribution. I just wish to expand a little bit more on the individual preparedness, what people can do. While all of the things about preparing the building and having your homes and all of that, they're done, not everybody going to get this information. Not everybody would get to the level of having every structure prepared. So it is important that if an earthquake that you cannot prevent from happening was not predicted that it's going to occur at a particular time and it occur, what should you do then? So there is a little procedure that we would like to give to you as information on something that you can do. Any emergency at all, any response to any situation, the more calm you can be, the better for you. It is easier said than done, GT.
I always say, once you're able to not panic in certain situations, you have a tendency to handle the situation better.
Good.
I have sort of trained myself to not panic. I don't know why, but I am good at that.
Maybe you came from a certain, genetic
sometimes I get
place
into a certain situation and keeping calm gets me through that thing with ease.
It would do for the average person if you are able to keep calm. And you may not remember everything that we spoke about on this program or everything that Nadma would have said to you, but some basic things that I would want you to remember. If you feel the violent shaking of the ground, if it is very, very heavy, your safety mechanism should kick in. One, what do I do? Where do I go? If it is very strong, two things should kick in. If you are inside a building, the building is likely to crumble. If you are on the outside, the earth is likely to pull apart. And if it is very strong and you're on the coastline, you're very likely to experience a tsunami. So what do I do for all of those? If the building begins to shake violently, move away from items that are likely to strike you or strike individuals. Doorways are some of the places that is recommended because there would be an arch and usually there's reinforcement over doors. There's something called a lantern that ties in the door frame and the structure together. And then you have also the ring beam that ties the structure before you get to the roof in the average house. So closer to the wall rather than stay in the middle and in a doorway. One of the other advantages in staying closer to the doorway is that if you happen to get trapped on the inside and such and rescue people come forward, they will try to find the entrance and they would know that that's a practice. They would like you to find people there.
Okay.
And you do not go scampering around. There's a process called drop, cover, and hold. Drop to the floor, cover your head if you can, and hold on to something that is sturdy. If there's a sturdy table, not just something that is very light or that can break, You can go underneath or you can stay on the side of it. It depends on the angle where you're at, so you can save yourself from things falling.
So that's where a quick visual of your environment comes to play.
Absolutely. That's where a very quick vision of it comes. If you are on the outside and there's a high-rise building or otherwise, do not try to get back into a concrete building, as a matter of fact. The wooden structure or the lighter structures, they are more resilient, and they are resilient to earthquakes, but they're not to hurricanes. So you'll be safer in a lighter building for an earthquake, but you are more exposed in a lighter building to a hurricane.
Mm-hmm.
And you are more susceptible to be covered in a strong build with an earthquake, but you are safer in a stronger concrete building if you have a hurricane. Oh. So if you see and feel...
So both have the advantage and disadvantage.
And disadvantage. So that's why I said double jeopardy, rock on a hard place, which one do I choose? Mm-hmm. Which preparedness measure will work? If you are away, you are on the outside, do not try to get into the building. Move away and get into an open area. Do not go standing next to lampposts or next to buildings, because buildings will sometimes fall at a particular angle. If it's a high-rise building and it tips, it's going to fall a particular distance away from it, and people will get crushed in there. Always ensure that wherever you seek to cover, drop, cover, and hold, that there is some way where you can have somewhere to breathe for some period of time. And that's why it is recommended that you can use the doorways. Don't stay in the middle of the structure. Try to get to the side, because if you have an upper level, when it cracks, they usually don't fall from the end. They crack sometimes down the middle. The pressure pulls down the middle. The weight pulls down the middle and it drops, and sometimes comes off.
Exactly.
Off to the side.
So that's where the side areas are more, sometimes it could be where you could be safe.
That could be safe, and you would have time to react to that. If you see and feel that the earth is pulling apart, obviously, you try to move away from where it's pulling, and don't try to be innovative or try to be inquisitive and try to look into where it is pulling apart and need to see how deep it is going. That would be to your detriment. Always ensure that you have some means of communication. If it happens in the night, that you can call somebody if you get separated. And this is why it is very good to have a family disaster plan.
Yes.
But if any of these things begin to happen and you get separated, especially in the night, you can tell people where to find you. The next or the continuing aspect of this program, we will speak about the emergency response, how the responders and what community people can do if you have a serious earthquake where things have happened, the earth pull apart, people and things have sucked in, buildings have kicked in, and people are trapped. How do you save these people, and what you can do under those emergency situations?
I certainly agree, because this program certainly need a follow-up on, and hopefully we can have a continuation of it next week.
We can.
We do.
Absolutely.
It certainly need a two-part. This one part alone can accommodate all the information that we need to throw.
And I thought I needed to build the foundation, and I thought that it was useful before we actually speak of the finer details as to what people should do in those emergencies. And if you have injuries and other things, all of this, the measures we spoke about, the different type of wounds that people may get, how you can treat them, all these will come into play as well again.
All right. Yep. Mr. McIntyre, that's when we come to the end of today's program. Time is upon us, already 10 a.m. I want to thank you once again for being here this morning and sharing the information as usual. Always fruitful information. And I certainly do learn a lot listening to you give out information that you do give out. And certainly we'll do this next week again. Thanks again, and until we do this next week.
My pleasure again. Thank you, listeners and followers, viewers, everyone. Right. My blessings.
Hey, folks, that's when we come to the end of today's program. Join us me again tomorrow. I'll join myself and Mr. McIntyre next week, Monday. But you can join me again tomorrow here on To The Point. Until then, have a good one. That's why we say goodbye to our viewers and listeners. Have yourself a great day. Goodbye.